I am the co-chair of the Social Justice Co-op of Newfoundland and Labrador, which is a member-based cooperative group, member-supported, that works for social change in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador to make a more livable province for all of us. Our very kind of like high-level vision is called the revolution of care. And so as we see it, capitalism has pushed us towards individualism, not considering and incentivizes people to take advantage of other individuals, to cut corners with them, et cetera, to a point where we say that the antidote to that is community and care. And so when Tom and Mari approached us to say, this is the kind of work that we do. Do you, is there anything we can kind of do with you? It seems like a very natural thing to then expand our revolution of care beyond just the human world to nature. And my family are Inuit from Northern Labrador in a region called Nunatsiavummiuk, which means our beautiful land in our language. And so as an Indigenous person, as an Inuit, for me, it was such a no-brainer because it is very much the way we already see the world as Indigenous people. We're part of the ecosystems that we, of the land that we're from, right? To be an Indigenous person is to be Indigenous to a place and to have a very, deep, living, ongoing connection to that place. And so, we have traditions around how you're supposed to interact with the land. And even in our negotiation, we have a modern treaty, which in Canada is called a land claim. And there's a process around that. And so through our land claim, one of the things we negotiated was for sea ice to be included in the land claim. And so, and when the negotiators from our side of things, the Labrador Inuit Association, as it was then, brought that to the provincial and federal negotiators, they kind of looked at people like they had three heads, like, what do you mean sea ice? You wanted to, this is a land claim, not a sea ice claim. But, for us, we see the sea ice as an extension of, the things like in the winter, it becomes our highway, right? So like, we don't have interconnected communities in terms of a road system, right? So then in the winter time, after the ice sets, you can go visit your cousins in the next communities over on snowmobile and that kind of stuff. And it's much easier, much more affordable to buy a snowmobile than it is to buy a boat. And so, yeah, we love the sea ice. For us, it really it opens up the universe it opens us up to the world. And so it's very much under threat because of climate change. So when Thomas, when I heard from our paid staff person, we've been approached by these people from the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. In another life, I had been a debating coach. And so I used to set topics for debate. And most recently in 2019 at Brandeis University, I set a topic based on this rights of nature idea. And so then, to be able to then also meet the person who, made the idea for the debate topic, also very cool. So lots of dope connections there. And it's been a great process and really fun to work with Tom and Mari. So one of the strengths, I think, of the approach of Tom and his organization is just going extremely local. And so the first step that we've taken is, Cedars helped us draft a Bill of Rights for the Atlantic Ocean, specifically for the jurisdiction of St. John's, which is the largest community in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. From in a Canadian scale, it's a small city. In America, it'd probably be a town. It's 180,000 people or so. And so, there's a few rivers that feed into the Atlantic Ocean in St. John's. There's a few lakes near the ocean that also feed it. And so there are bodies of water in the jurisdiction. And so the first kind of step is okay, let's so if you can guarantee the rights of those bodies of water to be healthy and like not actively pollute the Atlantic Ocean, like that is a positive, for that ecosystem. And then our hope then is that we can because the other thing too that I also, in my in a former day job of mine found out is that if you do other people's jobs for them, like sometimes they don't push back that hard against you, So if we're able to go to, other communities and towns and say, hey, like, we have this bill, it's already drafted, like all you need to do, is put it forward to pass it, right? And Newfoundland and Labrador, so it's one of the oldest settlements in North America. And that means that, even the settler Canadians who live in Newfoundland and Labrador, some of their families have been in the province for the last almost 300 years. And so we have a very strong relationship to the ocean. Almost all, if you look at a map of communities on the island of Newfoundland, almost all of them are on the ocean. And so it is kind of a no-brainer to get people to be pushing people to think about their relationship to the ocean. And, to be able to have some framing of the ocean has done so much for us. The ocean has fed us. The ocean has sustained our communities. Shouldn't we do something to protect the ocean?
How does the law work, Tom? Let's just say someone wants to bring a suit against a polluter. Would it only be in the area of Canada, or could it be anywhere along the eastern seaboard?
That's a great question. The law itself recognizes the standing of St. John residents to bring those actions. But technically, if there's something happening on that big expanse that's threatening the Atlantic Ocean ecosystem in terms of that vantage point of St. John's, then yes, any action could be brought, because of course, when you establish rights for something, even if rights for humans, they can be violated by activities happening outside of the area in which the law passes. So the immediate application, I think, is in terms of what's happening locally. So it could be pollution, like Patricia was saying, from inland waterways, development projects, even offshore drilling, because Newfoundland, surprise to me, is a big offshore drilling place. And so it could be anything from that to protecting the whales, bringing action in the name of the whales or the cod. Animals that have been affected by stupid human decisions over the past however many years, and industry decisions and corporate decisions as well. So I think the imminent aspect of it is really to kind of stop those projects which are damaging the Atlantic Ocean ecosystem in this general area. But regionally, of course, or internationally, like climate change is not a local event. And so climate change is hitting the oceans hard with acidification events. I could eventually see, maybe with this project, maybe with others that we're working on, about a much wider radius in which folks would be dragging major corporations into the municipal court here in St. John's for holding them liable for climate pollution. I think people are being creative now, and I think this is the sky's the limit. Rights of nature is not new at this point. It's 2006, first rights of nature law, but people have been yapping about rights of oceans for a while, but nobody's ever done it. And I think kudos to the social justice co-op for actually saying it's time to do it, and let's move with something big. It would be the first time something like this has passed anywhere, and it's very important for that reason.
So we're going to start with St. John's, but also in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's a very small province, only 500,000 people live there. And so most of the town councils are volunteers, like even the councilors, right? And so usually the way it's kind of done is like the mayor might be a full-time paid position, but then like all the other councilors would be a volunteer kind of situation. And so again, like a good opportunity in terms of if you go to a volunteer and you're like, I already have all of this done, that's like, takes the weight off of them to be able to, even if they wanted to do something like that, like there's very limited resources in terms of like paying, to pay their legal counsel to draft something like this, right? And so, you know, when you're dealing with like a sewage backload and you know, and you come and someone comes to you and is like, ever thought of paying someone to draft a bill for the rights? Like, no, this is not, that's not a conversation starter, right? And so that's why, you know, the approach that Cedar has of, you know, front loading some of the work in terms of doing the actual drafting of the bill, like the draft that they have done for us for the city of St. John's, you know, that is even like if we wanted to bring this to like try to get a legislature at a provincial level to bring this forward in our legislature, you know, we already have a draft now, right? And so they can change that to be for the provincial level, and it's much easier to work from a draft than to start from scratch, right? So instead of being reactive to issues as they happen, this also gives us the ability to be proactive in that, like now, if we are able to successfully pass these ordinances at a municipal level, it means that we will be able to, like when a developer comes, they're going to have to, this will now be part of their, like, you know, and like they have to demonstrate that the development that they're doing is not going to, you know, infringe on these rights that have been set out, compared to like the way things often happen, which is, you know, something goes for environmental assessment, and then, you know, you can make comments, and then the comments get sent back to the developer, and then the developer's like, okay, cool, we'll change that and reapply. You know, so it really does kind of flip the dynamic on its head in a positive way. So yeah, so we'll be bringing it forward to people that to town councilors we know to be allies to these kinds of, or at least sympathetic to these kinds of projects, and then being able to get them to move it in a council meeting. So there would be debate on the bill. It's possible, you know, that the bill as it's written by Thomas might not get passed, but maybe a watered down version of it might come through. But, you know, as Thomas has said, like, you know, there's nowhere has done any kind of rights for the ocean. There's been like rights for kind of like nature more generally, or like, you know, there's been some cases around the Great Lakes, some cases around rivers, but not like an ocean ecosystem. And, you know, when we think about the Atlantic Ocean, like I've lived on both sides of it. I've lived on the Labrador Sea, and I've also lived in Cape Town, South Africa on the South Atlantic, right? And so, you know, we have, and like, as Thomas has said, like there are possibilities for litigation beyond borders, because the thing about water is, even more so than land maybe, does not care about borders, right? And so it flows, like it has currents, it has directions, it has a cycle. This opens up an opportunity for people to start thinking about a new way of being able to take action. I think it really helps concretize the kind of action that people can take.
I think that's kind of the new activism that's needed, which is putting the people who care in a position of being able to control, or at least navigate, kind of restrain activities outside of their own place. Because, you know, if they care, then they're taking care of their own place. But it's the involuntary stuff that's happening outside their own place, whether from a tribal perspective, off the reservation stuff that's affecting reservation land, or in this case, a municipality where something might be happening outside those municipal boundaries that are affecting stuff within St. John's and within this larger ecosystem, that there has to be the ability to use the institutions of the courts to stop that harm from happening. I think it's very expansive. And it's the first of its kind.
I see this from the New Democratic Party in Canada, as well as the Democratic Party in the US. You know, there's almost this sense that like, if we follow the rules like the best, that there's going to be some kind of reward for that, you know? So like, oh, like we completely understand like parliamentary procedure so well. Look how well we understand parliamentary procedure. Like, okay, cool. But if we change the rules, right? We change the rules, then even people who are playing by that logic we changed the game.
Well, that's the genius of what Tom and Mari are doing. And that was changing the terrain rather than getting really good at playing a game you were never meant to win. And that's that mental shift that once you get it, you go, this bing moment, all of a sudden you're doing all the work and it's working.
So one contextually, like Inuit are one of the, like Inuit population pyramids look like African population pyramids. So there's like a lot of young Inuit around. And I think young Inuit are also much, there's a lot of desire for change, but there are some structural things that make it very difficult to do that. And so in Canada, all Inuit communities are treatied now with modern treaties. It's not that, it's like, if you take a bunch of Inuit and you put them in a Western government, is it an Inuit government? And so, yes, I think that, and so that makes it also like, I know like in the US, you have things like the Sunrise Movement, which is really trying to channel youth, right? And the energy that youth have and their concerns about climate change and trying to, take all that energy, put it in a productive place to try to win electoral victories. And that, structurally in Inuit communities would be almost impossible to do something like that, right? And so that makes it very difficult for people to know how to affect change. But, at the same time, we are really the canary in the coal mine when it comes to climate change in the world and North America specifically. So for example, like I ran in our provincial election in 2021, and normally the election was called at the end of January. And so normally, the sea ice is like well formed by then, right? Like generally sea ice forms in Nunatsiavummiuk in like December. And like people like don't really go on it until like end of December, middle of December, beginning of January. And like, I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll be able to pay someone to guide me on snowmobile to like do my campaign on snowmobile. But I couldn't because the ice was unsafe in February, so like almost a full 2 months late, right? And this year was a bit better, but other things were weird. So like the sea ice was good, but then like it basically went from being so, because a lot of people who live in the South don't realize this, but there actually is temperatures where it's too cold to snow, right? And so, we basically went from it being too cold to snow, like it snowed a little bit, but then it went too cold to snow, the sea ice set, and then it warmed up right away. And so then normally, the sea ice would be covered in like a nice thick layer of snow, so it'd be easy to get around a snowmobile on. And like if you go too fast on pure ice, then like it's like much harder to drive a snowmobile on pure ice. They're not really built for that. And so yeah, like there's like a, and like we can see into the future that, we're a very independent culture. We took care of ourselves for thousands of years. And now suddenly, it like you need a snowmobile that works. If a snowmobile part, if something goes wrong, you need to fly it in. You need gas, you need bullets, you need a gun. You need the traditional knowledge to be able to go out, which, due to colonialism and intergenerational trauma isn't always passed as it would have been. And so in a way, you're creating what is the perfect storm when it comes to like safety, climate change, and food insecurity, where now if people want to go hunting, they can't trust the traditional knowledge that has been passed down to them to be accurate in terms of where are safe places to go on the sea ice. And so then that means that people who are in difficult positions in terms of, being able to feed their families are now in a situation where they have to choose between their safety and their hunger.
That it's funny how these ideas kind of spread, because as soon as the social justice co-op started working on this and did their launch event and those things, there's now interest in Toronto and other areas who have heard about it and now want to move with it. So I think all that is very healthy, especially because Canada, a municipality in Canada and an Indigenous community passed the first rights of nature law last year. to protect the Magpie River over near Quebec. So it's all good stuff, and it's just it's got to roll into 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 communities.
One thing too is that I think about environmental racism, and I think about the way that not only that, so like we as Indigenous people think of ourselves as being part of our ecosystems. So that's one of the reasons why it's really easy. It's not a stretch for us to be able, like if someone says nature has rights, like I feel like most Indigenous people would just be like, yes, and so, but like, that there has been this concerted effort over time to decrease people's access to nature. And it's really sad.